Same thing with a rosary. If you carry a rosary in your pocket, it all gets all wadded up. And it looks like when you go back next year for those Christmas lights, it looks like a great big job. There's this big ball, and how in the world am I ever going to figure out how? But you get started on it, and you get to some little point, and you couldn't have told it ahead of time, but that was the critical point. You just get somewhere, and everything falls apart. And then you go, oh, now I see. I'll take this one and that one. And before long, it's easier than you thought it would be. I just think a lot of life is like that. It looks daunting at the outset, but once you get started in it, you come to kind of a critical point where things just happen.
Welcome back to another installment of Behind Greatness by Inspire. It is Luciano here as your host, speaking as usual. And before we jump into this next conversation, I would love to remind the listener, as I always do, to please subscribe, please rate, and please share. Really, three things: subscribe, rate, and share if you haven't already done that. And also, as a fourth, we are a registered charity. So any donation helps, and all funds go to the operation of the podcast. No salaries, just operation of the podcast. We all give our time for this, as do our guests, actually. And this is for simply the sake of knowing more, knowledge attainment, and exploring while we do it. So we're having lots and lots of fun with people all over the world. So you can do that. You can check us out. Obviously, our regular listeners know behindgreatness.org. So today we have a guest from Arizona. His name is Father Nathan Castle, and Father Nathan is from the Groves, Texas. He received an MA and MDiv degrees from the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Father Nathan has helped more than 400 stuck and not so stuck souls who died suddenly and traumatically to adjust to the afterlife. Victims of fires, automobile accidents, shootings, stabbings, drownings, and suicide come to him in his dreams, seeking help to resolve their quote unquote interrupted death experiences. Father Nathan believes that providing such help is something is something the Holy Spirit has given him and his prayer partners to do. In his Afterlife Interrupted books, Father Nathan is quick to point out that not everyone who dies suddenly gets stuck. He's the author of And Toto 2, The Wizard of Oz as a Spiritual Adventure, and Afterlife Interrupted, books 1 and 2, helping stuck souls cross over. Father Nathan, thank you. Excited about it. We connected before Christmas, and got to know your story a little bit firsthand. I still can't remember how we found out about you, but I'm sure it was in our knowledge attainment exercise that we do for fun, which is every day. And somehow we found out about you, and I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole before I reached out to you.
I'm on a lot of podcasts, so maybe somebody saw one of those.
Yeah, it has to be. Or maybe, and maybe a YouTube video. Regardless, we connected and threw me down another rabbit hole after we connected too.
Spend a lot of time in rabbit holes.
I do. Sometimes I get out to eat and sleep and run my business, but I spend a lot of time. It's fun. It's fun there. Why not? Yeah. Okay, so why don't we do this? I want to ask you right off the bat, what is an interrupted death experience?
I coined that phrase to make it sit next to the near-death experience. I'm a member of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Many people are familiar with that genre of experiences and stories that people have where they had a coronary or some other trauma that almost killed them, and who in the course of it experienced their consciousness going out of body, oftentimes above, like at the ceiling and looking down on their body on the operating table or something, and then having some experience perhaps of going through a tunnel toward an attractive light, maybe meeting deceased loved ones or religious figures or something, sometimes having a conversation in the afterlife, whereupon they're told that they can go no further and it's not their time, and they make their way back into their body with this experience to then make sense of and tell to other people. I was familiar with that genre of story, but then I began having contact dreams where people brought me a story of not nearly dying, but actually dying. In fact, um, you mentioned my book on the Wizard of Oz. It's over my shoulder on the wall. There's there's the scene in Munchkinland where the coroner has had to examine the dead body of the Wicked Witch of the East, upon which a house had landed, and he sings, "She's not only merely dead; she's really most sincerely dead." And the people that I experience are most sincerely dead. They died, but they did not have a peaceful sequence of events. They were so traumatized by the car crash or the shooting, the stabbing, whatever it was, that what they most needed upon their sudden death was something therapeutic, a place to be still, regather in the company of people who knew what to do for them. And then my part and my prayer partner's part is, now that they don't need this any longer, they've healed to the point where they're really ready to move on. We're like the discharge staff at a hospital. We help them get out the door, make sure that they understand their therapy, or the main thing that we do is make sure that someone is going to come for them because they need a guide. They're going somewhere that they've never been. Consequently, they need a guide.
Okay, so we've had on the podcast, as you know, we've had Dr. Bruce Grayson, who is a psychiatrist, also part of IANS, who has studied near-death experiences for 45 years. Pim van Lommel, who is a retired cardiologist in the Netherlands, who's done the same. So we've had them on. We've had a few people who've had near-death experiences. And we've had people on who are lucid dreamers and work in the space of lucid dreaming. So we like to talk about dreaming. That's why I thought your story, I'm going to say unique, because I haven't heard anything quite so similar. It's kind of a mix of these experiences that we've been having people share on the podcast. So these experiences that you have are not necessarily out of body. You get auditory and tactile communication via your dreams. So in
Yes,
your
and
sleeping,
especially visual.
especially visual. And how long have they been happening with you?
About 27 years, I think.
27. And it started off with a story about Ray.
Yes. I was on a retreat with a group of people in the mountains of northern Arizona. At the time, I was the director of the Catholic Campus Ministry at Arizona State University in Tempe, Phoenix. Was on retreat, and in the middle of the night, I was dreaming about finishing a round of golf with a priest friend. We were going from the 18th green into the bar. We got into the 19th hole, as golfers call it, and we found ourselves in the middle of a fundraiser, silent auction. Well, so far, all of this is my dreamscape. I've run nonprofits most of my life, and a silent auction is one kind of fundraiser. We were standing among these donated items, and I looked across the way and saw on the far wall, it was before we had televisions attached to walls, but it was a rectangle with something horrid inside of it. And I looked at it and said to my partner, "Look at that god awful thing. Who would donate that to a charity? It's horrific." But it was magnetic. It was attractive in an odd way. I went toward it and it moved toward me. We sort of met in the middle, and then inside the frame, a little video began to play of a man burning to death on the engine of a car. It was clear he hadn't been in an automobile accident. Somehow he caught fire. It wasn't clear why. It was a car from the late 50s or early 60s. It had fins and lots of chrome. My first car was such a car, a 1958 Olds Rocket 88. So he indicated to me about the time of his death by including that detail. He was screaming in agony. And he was screaming at someone outside the picture frame to the lower right, where the signature of an artist often is found. And I woke up. Well, it felt like being contacted. The first part of the dream was my psychobabble, but the second part had nothing to do with me at all. And it reminded me of nights when I've had to have the pager from a local hospital and take a turn being the priest on call in case there's a medical emergency and a Catholic person wants a priest right away. Sometimes you just have to shake yourself awake, talk to the nurse at the nurse's station, get the patient's name, the room number, and get out the door as fast as you can. It felt like that.
And so you decided to take action.
I said a prayer for him right away. I introduced myself and said, my name is Nathan, and I just got this dream that I know is not my stuff. I think you've placed it there because you're looking for help. I will do what I can. Right now, I'm going to go back to sleep, but in the morning, I'm going to find a partner and we'll be back in touch somehow. So that's what we did.
What is it about your mindset that didn't have you judge or dismiss what you experienced there? Because most people would just get spooked and then just try and forget about it, like the old me.
Well, I've had lots of experiences of a spiritual nature over the course of my life. And many of the stories of, if you recall, Jesus came back from the dead and he showed up to a lot of people and talked to them and so on.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I've had lots of experiences of an unusual kind, but I learned a long time ago that God is, if you will, an ET, an extraterrestrial, although he became a terrestrial, an earthling, and at least in the Christian story. Mm-hmm. And that when God and we overlap, that's what love does. Love makes two become one. And because God has such a magnitude and vastness and mystery, you can expect that when you merge with God, you're going to have some superhuman experiences, and I have.
So do you believe, you feel that this is it's a possibility for everyone to receive these dreams and communicate back?
I don't think I would say that. I think we all have capacities for experiences that are uncommon and seem beyond humanly natural, but they're of different kinds. And when I'm around other people who are talking about their experiences and their gifts, we compare notes, and we don't line up exactly, but we see similarities or something.
To revisit what we mentioned right at the beginning, you've done 400 of these things. So let's define these things, because I don't think we've done that for the listener. Because when we spoke last, you let me know that they communicate through you, and you have you have prayer partners in a protected prayer environment. But when this first happened, I was listening to your audiobook. In the beginning, you said that you had a prayer partner who had a similar gift of prophecy, and that you facilitated, these are your words I wrote down, you or the both of you facilitated the sacred speech. So the voice comes through you, or a partner, a prayer partner that you have, and it's communicating.
Or a prayer partner that has that gift. Not everybody does, but some do.
Okay. Right. So let's take you. So you have this gift. Mm-hmm. It comes through you. Are you in a lucid state? Are you in a trance state? Okay.
No, I'm lucid. I call it being co-conscious. I simply invite someone to share my consciousness, and my voice will not sound an awful lot different than it does right now with me using it, because it still has the fixed character of vocal cords that are material and air passing through them. Another person can use it and maybe speak more rapidly, or sometimes with an accent. Mm-hmm. But when different people are using the voice, I try to make it clear to the listener if someone's leaving and someone else is coming, who they're dealing with. Otherwise, it's a little confusing.
Okay. You facilitate these sessions with the person who's crossed over, the soul that's crossed over. And in your interpretation, that soul is not ready to fully immerse in the next dimension.
They are now, but they haven't been up till now.
Okay.
They've been through a therapeutic process that's gotten them centered and at peace, and with some clarity about their circumstance. And now they're ready for the adventure of the afterlife.
So you receive then their communication with this prayer group, surrounded by the prayer group, and then you take notes. Is that right afterwards, or your group takes notes?
No, I use an app on my iPhone and record the whole thing. And then when it's finished, I just hit send and it goes to an artificial intelligence that in about 1 minute's time can take about a 40-minute conversation and make it a Word document. And then I spend usually several hours. I don't know if you've ever seen your own speech on paper, but there are a lot of ums and ahs and incomplete sentences and so on. It's really annoying. So I do an edit that doesn't have to do with content. It's just for readability.
Okay. And you've done 400 so far in the last
About more like 500.
in the last 20 some odd years.
27, yeah.
27.
At the beginning, I wasn't recording all of them and filing them away, but I've been doing that for a long time now.
Before you went public in 2017, you must have been, or maybe still are, in very high demand once people figured out what you could do.
You mean from the afterlife?
Well, and from the afterlife. I'm also referring to people here who may have here on the planet who may have found out.
Well, yeah, until 2017, I was in active public ministry at universities. I was at Stanford for 7 years and Arizona State for 12 and UC Riverside in Southern California for 5. I'm now at the University of Arizona as a resident priest. I help out around the edges. I'm not employed there. But pastoring is a very complex job, and I just didn't think adding this afterlife weirdness to it would help the mission. So I just kind of did that on the down low until I felt like the coast was clear. It was safe to begin speaking about it publicly. And I was looking for a late in life career. I'm about to turn 67. So 7 years ago at 60, I was thinking campus ministry is really kind of a young person's game. I've done it for a long time, but I wanted a new challenge. So I started scanning about for different things I thought I might be able to do to contribute. And I gave the Lord 3 different options, and he chose the 4th one. It was this thing I was already doing, and so I went public with it.
So it's only 7 years. So for 20 years, you weren't public about it.
Not outside a small circle of family and friends.
That is a long time to keep something away from people that is absolutely, in my opinion, extraordinary. But
well, it's what I did. I just felt like I had to do what I had to do, and I just felt like this would have gotten in the way.
You said that the church doesn't like to use the word channel, so I've avoided using the word channeling because you already told me this. Yeah. but listeners, our listeners are going to ask, so that's why I want to. They want to avoid using that word, and you said you like using the word because you said it's radioactive. You said you like using the word prophecy instead.
I do. In the Pauline literature, the letters of St. Paul in the Christian New Testament, he lists a lot of spiritual gifts, and prophecy is usually the second one on the list. It's pretty important. And if you've ever been to either Jewish or Christian worship, there's probably a reading from the prophet Isaiah or one of the other prophets. And in the same short reading, the lector might have to use 3 tones of voice to communicate well what's happening inside the text. There might be a narrator voice that says the prophet Isaiah went from this town to that. And when he got there, he ran into this other guy and said, "Hi, I'm the prophet Isaiah." And so there's a narrative voice, then there's the prophet's voice himself. And then before long, the prophet says, "Thus says the Lord, I want you to stop oppressing the poor." So there's already 3 uses of the same voice in that text. And I just believe that I know what that feels like because my voice can be used in different ways. It's no big deal. It's right there in the scriptures. And I have plenty of people who are channelers or mediums among my friends. And I mean them no ill will. I'm just trying to stay a Catholic priest in good standing. And it's just not helpful to use those words to refer to myself. And I don't think it's necessary.
I think I agree that it's not necessary. I'm starting to believe that. I mean, I used the word extraordinary a few minutes ago. I don't know how extraordinary it is. I think there are some of us that naturally have a thinner veil. And I believe that you are one of those. But I also believe that there are people who may have a thinner veil, but who also believe in connecting through love. And I don't even mean religiously, but in your sense, your faith is very strong. And I think that adds I think that even shaves away another layer to that thin veil.
Well, and it's all about love. God is love, and that's all God does.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do.
Well, so I also believe that too. That's why this is also fascinating to me, because you have a perspective that's very different than others on this program who have talked about similar or have talked in the same space. So I say this out of curiosity because I know listeners are also going to ask too, because you have this ability. And you said that you were only witness to an exorcism once, and that it made you really, really tired.
Well, it wasn't exactly. It was involved a demonic activity that I needed to bring to a close because it was harming one of my parishioners, and I loved her, and I couldn't bear to see her in pain. I am not trained as an exorcist. That's a very specific role in the church.
Yeah,
it's like having a degree behind your name. I wouldn't purport to be an exorcist, but at that time and place, I did everything I could within the structure of the church to get her the help she needed, and nothing worked. And at the time, that diocese didn't have an exorcist, and the people they sent me to were unavailable, and she happened to be cutting herself, and I just couldn't bear that. So I found another priest and her therapist, and we just trusted that sometimes you're just it, you might wish that somebody more expert than you were around, but sometimes life just treats you that way, for whatever reason, you're it. And I was it. So we dealt with that.
That story, when you related it to me, spoke to me fairly strongly because I went to a Catholic high school, also called Saint Michael's.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big statue of Saint Michael's, winged,
yeah.
And with a large sword. And so you don't mind if I quote what you?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, you said that you were tired by the end of this, and you had asked Saint Michael to handle it, or to help you handle it, and to vanquish. That's right. You said to vanquish, and he responded to you, "I was not vanquishing a foe. I was disarming a brother."
Yes. All we were doing was I invoked Mary, Mother of Jesus, because I know that she is very effective at dealing with the dark side, and has been for 2,000 years or more. And so I'm wearing my Dominican habit, and around the belt is the rosary. And when it was given to Saint Dominic by Mary in the early 1200s, it's supposed to sort of resemble a sword. We wear it on the belt where you would keep a sword, but you're not going to. It's a weapon of peace. And this part, it goes right over the middle of my body, is called a scapular, and it's supposed to suggest chainmail. Like if I
was completely unaware of this.
Yeah, it's covering the main torso of my body. If somebody were to hit somebody jousting, for example, in their torso, it probably would still hurt, but the wound might not be mortal. It might be survivable. So anyway, I knew that I was fortified, and I just did what needed to be done. And in the course of that, we were getting tired, and I was just saying Hail Marys just kind of to try to drown out the cursing that the thing was doing. And toward the end of it, I just said to Saint Michael quietly under my breath, there's I think it's Psalm 131. It says, "I have not gone after things too great nor marvels beyond me." In other words, I don't think I'm some big deal dragon slayer here. I'm just trying to help somebody that's a member of my church. I'm doing everything I know how to do, but I think I've reached the end of what I know how to do. I want to rely on you to finish this up. And when I did say that, the woman we were helping began to scream and writhe, very much like what one might see in an exorcistic movie. And I just thought, oh my, now what have I done? But within about a minute, she calmed down and everything resolved. And before we were finished, I just said to St. Michael, I need you to teach me what just happened. When I asked for your help, it caused her pain. I would never in my life cause her pain. Why did it cause her pain? And that's when he said, Nathan, I was not vanquishing a foe. I was disarming my brother.
So to discuss the sword of peace and the cloth of chainmail, you are a guardian, but also a guardian ready to disarm or help to disarm.
I believed I could do what was within my power, and I believe that when I get to the edge of my strength, that doesn't have to be a terrible thing, because I believe that I can avail myself of all the strength in the universe. I can say to the Lord and to the Holy Spirit, take it from here. I've done all I know how to do. And that's what I did. And that's the way it played out. So I've not had to do that again. And please, members of your audience, don't contact me with your demon problems.
No, of course. Yeah.
But I'm just not that guy. I was in a circumstance where somebody needed help. And as I said, I tried to gather a team to help, and it all kind of fell apart, but she needed help. And so
because you are who you are. Yeah, you are who you are. You wanted help. So no. Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you to ask the.
And my books don't really have to do with hell or demons or anything like that. They're just about people that had you can call it a hellish experience. They flew through the windshield of a car and died, or they got shot or drowned or something. They went through a death that none of us would wish on anybody. But they're healing on the other side, and we just help them get out the door.
You told me, switching gears here, you told me that you became a priest in spite of yourself.
My parents taught all 5 of us kids that we could be anything we set our mind to do. And I looked around at about 20 years old, 21 years old, and thought, well, what does the world need one more of that I could become? And by that time, that was 1978, I was graduating college. Catholic seminaries were drying up. Hardly anybody was joining them. Mm-hmm. And I loved the Lord, and I just said, I went to a Presbyterian college, so I wasn't surrounded by Catholic stuff or Catholic people, but my prayer partners at that time were mostly Protestant. But my prayer at the time was, oh God, take me, I'm yours, I'll do anything you want. Just don't make me be a priest. Amen. And
wasn't listening.
Yeah, well, I got tired of hearing it. I love you almost completely. Who wants to hear that?
Yeah. Maybe it's
I love almost everything about you. No, nobody wants to hear that. So
do you believe it's because...
I just said, yeah, go ahead. I'll even do that if you want.
You had 2 aunts who were nuns, who became nuns right out of high school in the 30s.
Yeah, right? And the 32 and 35. I have a photo of them right here. It's not all that great a photograph. It's off-centered, but that's them.
Wow. What year is that?
I think it's about 1937.
And this is in Texas, right?
Yes. One of them, they each, you can take a religious name when you enter our order. You don't have to stay with the name you had. Mm-hmm. And they each wanted to honor one of their parents by taking their name. So my grandfather's name and my father's name is Maxwell. So the closest saint that she could find was Maximus. So I have an aunt named Sister Mary Maximus. And she loved my dad with a great love. And even in the days when sisters didn't have very much freedom about their movement, and neither one of them ever learned to drive. They always had to rely on other people to ferry them around. Mm-hmm. But she made every effort to be with us as we were growing up. And we had a farm, and she loved to get out, even with all that clothing on. She wore the full habit, and she would be out digging up stuff and replanting things. She loved plants. So I grew up around her, especially. And the other one, Leona took her mother's name, and I didn't know her as well until later in life. She lived far away, but yeah, that was a large part of my growing up.
You grew up partially in Texas, but also on a farm in Louisiana with a
Right on
bunch
the
of
border.
siblings.
We live very near the Sabine River, which is the border between the two states. And my dad wanted to have a farm. He had 5 kids over 15 years, and it was really hard to figure out what to do to keep, like a 2-year-old and a 17-year-old entertained at the same time. So he bought this farm where he could just let us all run around, and we could invite our friends, and there were horses and lakes and lots of things to do. A lot of it was work. We worked really hard because my dad was really insistent on, there was always hard work to do, and then you play after that. But anyway, we have a lot of happy memories of those years.
And you said your grandmother was a mystic?
Yes, my dad's mother lived next door. When I was 4 years old, my parents built their dream home on a vacant lot behind the house we were living in. And his parents moved into the house we moved out of. And so I grew up around them all the time. And she used to walk around the house talking to St. Anthony of Padua and to Joseph the Carpenter. Those were her two buddies, that and Mary, Mother of Jesus, but especially St. Anthony. She just loved that man. And she had this way, if she wanted to do a thing she didn't know how to do, she'd figure out who was the patron saint of it, and then she'd put them to work. She would just say, "Get over here, and we're gonna build a bathroom. we're gonna rewire this house." And she'd get Time Life magazines or do-it-yourself books in the mail, and call on her saint friends, and then she created a winery. I don't know. She did all this grafting of plants.
Woman of action.
Yeah, if she'd never done it before, it was a challenge. She was always doing something she'd never done, and using the saints to do it.
We just recorded a session with a woman out of Alberta named Jennifer Mather, and she's a professor at a university there, but she is a prominent expert, North American expert on cephalopods, specifically octopuses.
Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. She also advised the filmmakers on that Netflix series, My Octopus Teacher. Remember that a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's something, anyway, I mentioned that because there's something about octopuses that she said I was wonderful to hear. She said, an octopus, I'm paraphrasing, cannot not know about something. It needs to understand something. So that's, just the energy of her grandmother just reminded me of that, because we had that conversation very, very recently.
All right. I never thought of her as an octopus, but I will from now on.
She's like an octopus. And she also said the octopuses, they straddle a line. They live their lives straddling between curiosity and fear.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well.
We talked about that a little bit. That was fun. So going back to then your experiences in your prayer groups and when you're communicating with the stuck souls, you also said that you were told, I suspect by one of the stuck souls, but you tell me, that your consciousness looks like a green sparkling river.
Yeah, there was a man who had died in a car crash. I think he's in the first of my 2 books, who said there's something like a line. You have to choose to come to me and to my prayer partner. So it's like getting in a line. They often call it a line. And they said, when we were brought here, your consciousness, I was asleep, and they explained that was the method, that they would be brought to me when I was asleep, and my consciousness to him looked like a green, sparkly river. But he said, they bring you there, but you still have to launch the boat. Like you still have to choose to get in it. So there was something volitional on his part. He had to choose to do it. And when we're in a session, after we don't enter into any of this until we prayed security. St. Michael, Holy Mary, St. Benedict, Padre Pio, St. Dominic, a lot of them. I call them my posse. We surround ourselves with a sacred circle of love, and then invite the person who brought a dream. And that's when they, if you will, step into the green sparkly river. They move into my consciousness, and then they talk through. It's not hard at all. They've usually never done it before, but their guardian angel, I often ask their guardian to model it for them and to come on the line and do what's essentially a mic test, as we had to do before we started this podcast. You usually can't burst onto these Zoom calls and have everything working perfectly. There's usually something that needs to be tweaked.
Almost always.
Yeah. And it's sort of like that. You arrive and you get centered, and I read the dream story as I wrote it down in my journal. I read it twice, once for the mind and once for the heart. Make sure that my partners, who are often are not in the same room with me, very often we're doing this on Zoom. The pandemic really made that necessary.
Sure.
Sometimes we're in the same room, but in recent years, no. And so once we're confident that my prayer partners understand the context, I often will ask, could we please have a guardian angel in this scene come forward first to show the one they love how to do this? But in the meanwhile, could you add some clarity? Like in the dream, a person might have shown me that they were the driver of a car that went off the road and crashed, but they didn't let me know whether they were male or female. It just didn't come up. So could we please know the gender of this person? Could we know relative age? Could we know whether we're in this country or another? Usually not, or sometimes there's a lot of figures in the dream, like a crowd scene in a movie. And I'll say, could you let us know, are we helping only one person today or more than one? Because sometimes they'll go in a group.
Going back to the actual river, the color, like I know, whatever. Let's take this question as it is, because I've been listening to a lot of stories and people's experiences, and we've been exploring a lot in this podcast. You also let me know that one of your goals is to know more about the physics of consciousness.
Yes.
And I want to relate that to the, it's going to sound silly, but whatever, who cares? Why were you told green? What is it about green? Why weren't you told blue or pink or orange or yellow? Is there significant? There has to be a significance there, but do you think there is one?
Well, I just don't know. And the guy that told me that was a pretty unsophisticated guy. He just looked at green and called it green. That's all.
Okay, so we're going to blame him.
Well, I don't know that it's blaming anybody. It's just he was just describing his environment, and he said, "There's this green river here, and it's your consciousness." One thing I've learned is that sometimes at the beginning of any conversation, when you're just breaking the ice with someone you don't know, you might spend 5 minutes on some sort of light chat. You must do this as an interviewer. You know that you've got more important things to do than chat, but there comes a moment when you take it to the next level. And then maybe half an hour into an interview, you might want to ask a person a very personal question, and you might take it even to a next level of depth. Mm-hmm. And that happens in the course of these sometimes. And when it does, they describe having to pause and reconnect more deeply. I've heard of people talking about screwing in a light bulb, turning the knob on a radio to get to a higher frequency. One guy told me that he said, your consciousness has an up and down character like a wave or like a stock market curve. And I just have to watch yours, and I have to make mine match it. It would be easier for me to do that than to try to expect you to do it. So you just be still and I'll match you.
Maybe your level of connection, maybe your level of, or your way of going to the next level is the disconnect from wholly human experience. Because
I do a lot of reading in related fields, and a lot of people talk about out of body experiences. I don't think I'm out of body at all. I know I've felt that once before, mm-hmm. but that's not what this is. I'm in my body, and other people find me and find my consciousness and avail themselves of it with my permission.
We had a conversation with Jill Bolt-Taylor, who's a neuroanatomist. She was on the podcast. She had a very viral TED Talk back in 2008. But we talked about her story, and her story is based on a brain aneurysm that she had, or excuse me, a stroke. And she describes her story is split into two. She has a story of the human being with the left side of her brain trying to figure out how to dial a number. So she was reduced to mumbling and not understanding what she was seeing and trying to work through it as she was experiencing the stroke. This is a neuroanatomist. And then the other half of her, and she explains it as herself as a giant whale gliding through a sea of silent euphoria. But she wasn't totally disconnected. She was herself, but not herself. And the reason why I also bring that up, or why I also wanted to bring that up, but because we talked about disconnecting, not disconnecting in different states, is because you have said, and I believe you alluded to it at the beginning of this conversation, but you have said to me is that you need, what's important for you is to receive love, and that you find yourself floating in a sea of love. And all you want to do is magnify it and give it away.
Yes.
I see I see a parallel with what she was experiencing as a giant whale. So even metaphorically speaking, but literally she was feeling like a giant whale through a silent sea of euphoria, where she felt love and constant positive energy. Do you find, as I just related this story badly to you, do you find how I related this to you and what you are trying to achieve in your sea of love as similar?
Yes, but it doesn't have to always be in some kind of paranormal format. I might wake up on a day where I'm cooking and shopping and doing a lot of other things to make the world go around and not having anything to do with this topic of my books and all this afterlife activity. And that's still what I try to be conscious of, that I believe that that the universe is a sea of love, and that as I breathe it in, if I'm conscious that I'm fully loved, and so is everyone around me, but not everybody knows it, I could possibly magnify it and make it easier to see and give it away. And
yeah, well, maybe for her that was her starting point. That her sea was the starting point for which you already are immersed.
that could be. Sometimes people will ask me, "What's your life's purpose?" And I've had a lot of life's purposes. I'm almost 67. I'm assigned by my order to different places to do different things. And the consistent thing for me is that my job is to receive love, magnify love, and give love away. Everywhere, every day, all the time. And then after that comes all the detail of job descriptions and task lists. And I have lots of tasks. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to start making a to-do list.
I believe
I've been traveling for the last few days, and I've fallen behind on some of my tasks. So I'll do that later. But while I'm doing my tasks, instead of feeling like somebody who's dissipated, do you ever seen those vaudeville acts where somebody's spinning plates on a stick?
Yep.
Well, there was a time in my life where I thought that's all I was, is that guy. And then I had to get rid of that metaphor because it's exhausting. And
Sure.
It's no fun. And nobody's ever great at that anyway. Anytime I ever saw that act, some of the plates fall and hit the ground and break.
Yeah.
So I got rid of that and just thought, no, that my job isn't to keep all these plates spinning. My job is to receive love, magnify love, give love away. And I began to be a happier man after I turned that corner.
If this were to all stop and you would not be able to prophesize anymore, how would your life change?
On the one hand, I wouldn't know until I was there. On the other, I have lots of things to do in the course of the day. I'm an active priest. I have mass to say at 5:00 tonight, preaching. I have friends and family. I just baptized my niece's baby on the weekend. I play golf. I have a dog friend that I dearly love, who is the dog of my best friend, who I dearly love. I have lots of things going on. And if this all stopped, one thing I'm doing is I'm writing a book on the Gospel of John as theater. That doesn't really have all that much to do with all this otherworldly activity. So
why are you writing that book?
I love the Gospels, and I'm a writer, and the ancient writers had to write to illiterate people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? How do you write a story that illiterate people will receive, remember, and take to heart? And of the four gospels in the Christian Bible, three of them are called synoptic: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're so similar to one another that they're the same vision, synoptic. And then John is, off on its own. And I just think John is not so much a short story as it is the script of a play. And I want to crowdsource it on Zoom and take it scene by scene and get people imagining if you were acting in this scene, where would you be, and where would you be in relation to other people? If you were watching it, what would it be like to see it? How would you stage it? I want to get a bunch of people from a bunch of angles fleshing out. One thing Jesus does in the Gospel of John is go through the fourth wall. That device of talking directly to the camera or directly to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that all the time.
It can't be an accident that most people who were illiterate relied on actors reading out and dramatizing written words by poets and writers.
And even if it were not the case, if my thesis were wrong, I think it's still a fun idea.
Sure.
And I think we could maybe flesh out parts of that story that people haven't noticed before because we went to the trouble. So that could be done on Zoom. I'm thinking of, Zoom, what are those little rooms, those subsets. You put four people over there and just get them playing with a scene. A lot of the lighting cues are right there. So is the blocking. You can watch how people move in the scene and the relationships they have with one another just in space. So that's another project.
You use the word fun. What do you have most fun doing?
Well, creativity is really exciting to me. When you open the first page of God's book, what do you learn about God? It's creative. It's making something out of nothing. And I've always enjoyed making something out of almost nothing. I don't have the power to make something out of nothing, but I live a vow of poverty, and we just don't run to the store and buy anything we please. You figure out a way. I used to study store windows and how did they make something look really high end. Even the big expensive department stores don't spend a lot of money on window displays.
Mm-hmm.
They use inexpensive materials, but they craft them together in a way that gives a high end look. And I was an art student at one time. So I used to do a lot of art and environment in churches. And we have a lot of seasonal change in the church. And so we just finished Christmas about on the 9th of January and moved into ordinary time. And then soon it'll be Lent. So I used to do a lot of artwork. That's kind of a road not traveled. My grandmother was an artist and I've kind of put the paints aside, but I love creating and all this nonsense. I have my own podcast. How did that happen? Just the website and the YouTube channel and speaking on this topic. It's all just so fun.
Well, maybe you're not creating something out of nothing. You could be creating something out of fun.
Yeah, and I call my podcast the Joyful Friar. That's St. Dominic's nickname.
There you go.
And it's good for me now because sometimes I'm not naturally joyful, and I'll catch myself being a whiner or pouting or something, and I'll go, and you call yourself the Joyful Friar. Snap out of it, guy.
Right. You told me in your communication when you're in your prayer group that you have a rule that they can't use crying through your body.
No, I don't allow crying in my body. And in counseling with human counselors on this earth plane, I pretty much tell them, if you need to cry, my shoulders are not available. I'm just no good at that. There's lots of shoulders to cry on, and mine are just not available for that purpose. I can help you. You know how do you put the Christmas lights away carefully at the end of the holiday?
Not really.
So next year, are they all in a big wad and you have to start disentangling them?
Yeah, it's a complete mess. I never learned.
All right. Same thing with a rosary. If you carry a rosary in your pocket, it all gets all wadded up. And it looks like when you go back next year for those Christmas lights, it looks like a great big job. There's this big ball, and how in the world am I ever going to figure out how? But you get started on it and you get to some little point, and you couldn't have told it ahead of time, but that was the critical point. You just get somewhere and everything falls apart. And then you go, oh, now I see. I'll take this one and that one. And before long, it's easier than you thought it would be. I just think a lot of life is like that. It looks daunting at the outset, but once you get started in it, you come to kind of a critical point where things just happen. And I believe the Holy Spirit's part of that, because I asked the Holy Spirit to be a part of it. Say, I can get started on this. I don't know if I can finish, but would you help me? And I get the help I need.
Maybe because there is no finish.
Mm-hmm. I remember my grandmother, when she was painting, she was very proud of the fact that she never had a lesson, but she would get her easel and her canvas and her oils, and she would say, "Sweet Jesus, take my hand and let's go." So she didn't presume that she was the sole active agent of creating a painting. She knew that she was doing it with help. And so I maybe inherited that. I don't strike out to do stuff under my own power. I just invite other people to help me, and they do.
I completely believe that we have help when we are creating, when we are in a state of creation. We're not doing it on our own.
Well, you're doing that with me today, and there'll be people who listen to or view this show who had never heard of me unless you had extended the invitation and made it happen.
Or unless you were doing something and made it happen to have me connect with
that
you.
Too. Yeah, that too. That's the way
we're
that
part
works.
of that same entanglement. Last question for you.
Okay.
What does greatness mean for you?
I'm thinking of lesser than and greater than signs in elementary school math.
Yep.
Do you remember those?
Yep.
Greatness to me means larger than something else, larger than smallness. And I believe the universe is enormous. And even the word Catholic means universal. I've been a Catholic all my life. It means I'm a universal person. And the universe is expanding. So we shouldn't be static. We should expect ourselves to expand. As we do, we're going to blow past earlier boundaries. It's going to hurt when you pop. But that if you really want to be an expansive person, if you want to be greater than what you were before, that's, I think, our destiny. I believe it's the way that God designed us. Jesus said, unless the seed fall to the earth and die, it remains a single grain. But if it breaks open, it can bear much fruit. So when I think of greatness, I think of naturally becoming something grander, larger, deeper, purer, more beautiful as things progress.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Father Nathan.
I thank you. You're a lovely man.
Likewise.
Thank you.
I'm going to take this with me. It's going to hurt when you pop, but I think we all need to understand that we got to feel pain if we're going to break through anywhere.
It's momentary. It passes, and then you go on to the next thing.
Exactly. Thank you again.
All right. God bless you, buddy.
Hey, it's Enrico Colantoni here, actor, director, and dedicated napper. Like what you heard today, there's more to come. Make sure to subscribe to Behind Greatness and learn about our live events at inspirenorth.com. You'll also find links to our social media right on our website, so be sure to give us a like and follow. Until next time, stay inspired.